So we can do.
For folks on Zoom, if you have any questions, feel free to share in the chat, or you may also raise your hand and I will call on you via Zoom. Right. So welcome to the West District meeting. Thank you for being here in person, and thank you for joining virtually. We have a couple of updates, and this is the brief agenda. So starting off, to follow up with everyone on the Front Park perimeter security project, it is mostly done. The thing that is, oh, actually, before I get into that, I would like to reintroduce our operations staff. So Anthony White is our district supervisor, and he's also the senior supervisor that assists Jim Coyle, our director of operations for the entire park system, with Devotee as well as Angel, who supports him for the West District. So if you see them in the parks or their staff, definitely say hi.
How do you say, is it Devotee? How do you say his name? Yep. I've seen him around. I didn't know his name.
Yeah, he's been with us for a long time. So another on Zoom. So for the perimeter security update at Front Park, previous meeting we had went through this project in the greater detail, so I won't go into detail right now. But if anyone has questions, you can let me know. So basically in three portions. Over here is the area that it's along Basti, so basically a planting of many new trees.
He's already been done.
Yes.
Planted? Are they?
Yeah, they have been planted, and mainly to help with more shade eventually when the trees go taller, and also with oh, sorry. There's people downstairs. I'm gonna go get them. Sorry, folks. All right, I'll be right back.
See, let me do it. I'll go London. I'll go London.
Oh, thank you, Valerie. Mary is heading down to get you right now. Sorry about that. We'll wait a few minutes for them. Okay. But yes, so the trees here have been planted. If anyone has been to Front Park recently, you will have seen the trees planted there. And actually this weekend at Front Park, I just saw on the news and I thought it was interesting. They have one of the largest inflatable playground or something at Front Park, like the bounce houses. Oh my gosh, it's interesting.
I have a question. Do you want me to wait or?
You can ask it for now. Go ahead, Tina.
I was under the impression that there was originally going to be more lighting in the park, but since we're talking about the security part, and that the city decided against that because they didn't want to encourage people to hang out, and yet it seems like if you leave it dark, you'll get the kind of people hanging out that you don't want, and if you had more light, for security purposes, it actually make the park safer. So did they cut back on lighting?
I'm not too sure about the lighting part for the park, so I can check in on that. Thank you. Do you remember when you discussed this topic on lighting?
Yes, I did discuss it. Well, I didn't discuss it with anyone at Olmsted, but I did with someone that was a possible contractor. And I talked to him back in April, and he said that they first had the lighting in and then they reduced it dramatically because they felt that people, if there was light, people would hang out at night. But, we were talking about it, and it's really, I think, the opposite. If there's not light, there's more of a security risk because the kind of people that would be interested in hanging out at a place where there's no light are more of a concern than if you have sort of the place illuminated in the evening.
Gotcha. Thank you, Tina. Yeah, we regularly assess sorry about that.
That's all right.
Thank you. We do assess the lighting.
They always spark us. Hello.
But I assume it's ultimately the city that made this decision. Am I correct on that?
I think it's a work, like a partnership together. I mean, ultimately it is a city park and lighting is city lights, I guess you could say that, but so we do assess the lighting situation at every park annually for like light bulbs that go out, or if more lighting is needed at certain areas, then we go out and like we'll prioritize lighting in certain parks depending on the need. So with your input now, I will check in with my colleagues and see whether we can like go back to Front Park in the evening or at night to check in on the lighting situation.
Okay, yeah, I would be curious and maybe since April, they've changed that decision, because it does look like from your map here that that whole area in orange illuminated?
No, it's
No.
no, it's just the orange just represents a different zone that I quadrant off for the sake of the meeting.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, appreciate it. Right, hello, sorry about the Zoom situation and yeah, so we're just going through on the perimeter security project to touch base again. We have some folks on Zoom, and thank you for coming in first. So the project is mostly complete, and with one big thing that's not yet complete, and it's in this portion here. The gate that is supposed to be by the entrance to the park is not yet been installed, and it will no longer be solar powered. Initially the plan was to make it solar powered, but it was not possible with like direction of the sun or something like that. So it will not be solar powered, and partly because of that, we are looking for power source right now that will make sense to power the gate and run wires. I'm not too sure about the engineering side of this, but that is one of the holdups for this gate. Yeah. Any questions on this project?
See, are the trees are all installed? Is there any vandalism to the trees?
As of right now, I've not heard of it at least, so we're hoping.
When were they installed? Just this spring?
This spring, yep, and
Okay.
late last fall too.
The gate looks great.
Oh,
Or I'm sorry, the fence.
the fence by the
Around
playground, yeah,
is like-
that's good. I'm so glad. Yep. So in case anyone's wondering, the fence by the playground is right over here. So the fence that is adjacent to the road, in between the road and the playground, mainly to enhance safety. It was previously bushes, and then if we do cut the bushes, it's basically you're right up against the road. The next item is to follow up on the prospect shelter. So the city has something going on right now regarding like an abatement process. I'm not exactly sure of that side of the process, but we are basically waiting for them on a study, and following which we still need to secure funding to rehabilitate the interior of the shelter building. But the main goal at the end of the day for Olmsted is to provide community access to park amenities like bathrooms, water fountains, etc., bike racks if the community wants that, and potentially a community space that is meaningful for the neighbors and the communities themselves. So we'll conduct a community engagement process with the neighbors, block clubs in the area, the schools that are nearby, the Uville, etc., to check in on what eventually when we get to that stage to check in with them. So there's no updates for this project, right? As an overview, I guess. Last year we did conduct a collaboration with some high school students with the Collaborative Center for Social Innovation to work on, to kind of like gauge their ideas as the younger generation on how they foresee this shelter to be used in the park. So what they did was they went through a process to create like a community engagement plan. They talked to neighbors, they held events in the park weekly. And yeah, so it was an interesting process for us to learn from them, and hopefully they also got something out of the project. So in Prospect Park 2, if In case you forgot, last year was a huge year for Prospect. We have new pathways that were widened throughout the park, as well as benches. Over 20 benches were installed in the park. And all of these benches are available for commemorative gifts that at the end of the day go back to our support the operational budget. So we are hoping that to continue the momentum for this park, and hopefully this project can take place sooner or later. Any questions? Days Park. Right, so Days Park is in coordination with the Block Club. We have representatives here today, Debbie and Mary, thank you. And since 2 years now, maybe,
I think it's been 3. I think this is
yeah.
our 3rd year.
oh my gosh, time flies. So on a coordinating the Block Club and the charter school in the neighborhood there on a flag system to encourage more thoughtful use of the park and the landscape, keeping in mind that that park was initially intended for more passive use, and with the high number of children and students in the school, oftentimes it's being used for more active use instead of passive, and that creates a lot of compaction of the soil and the turf in Days Park. So in case that you're wondering, this is the crew, and I was the one taking the photos, so you don't see my face. But like, if you do go to Days Park and you see the flags in this park, which is all handled by Debbie herself, which we really appreciate. Green flags, the green, yellow, and red flags are all present something different. And we do work with the school to remind them to send it out to the teachers and the facilitators at the school to remind the teachers of these rules, so that it's constantly top of mind that the park to follow the rules, basically. One of the challenges that we face, I guess I learned this year, was how new teachers come on board and they're not familiar with the system. So having to re-educate and spread the awareness again was an important thing.
I would like to add to that, as I
Sure.
do every single session. The city has designated areas in specific parks for designated types of activity. This park is not designated to be used the way it is used by Elm Village Parks. Secondly, because the school takes up so much of the park, it means that other people do not have access to the park. And when people do have access to the park, it's like a mud pit some days, it's like a dust field other days. Things that we planted have gotten. People feel really uncomfortable with the number of things that are missing.
Thank you. And you live right by Days Park, so you experience it in a different way that I ever would. So, but this is the reason why neighbors have your input is very valuable. Because you live right by the park and you see it every day. Okay. The next item, sorry, the person I just showed here, is a park user data strategy. So this last fall to this spring, we worked with NYU Wagner School on a capstone project where this group of masters in urban planning students helped us with creating a strategy for collecting park user data. And the goal at the end of this strategy is to, when they created it, is to have a longer shelf life for us so that we can constantly use it over time. And so it's not, they didn't go out and collect the data for us. They created the strategy so that we can execute the process. And the goal of this would be to help us better understand who the park users are. So for example, back to Days Park, having everything that you said that is qualitative, some kind of day, but in a form of a data-driven spreadsheet or
Is it possible to have a user survey done of Days Park, like on a weekly basis when school is in session?
Yep, so this strategy has certain guidelines for like how many, in order to get accurate data, because the strategy takes into account like aggregate data. So it says like you need for every point of entry. So for example, I'm giving the example, actually, I'll get to Days Park in a bit, but so let's say these two parks, Front Park and Prospect Park. So they've identified entry counts, and these orange line that you see on the screen is basically the route that volunteers would walk. And when they are walking, they have so they will basically have have like an iPad or a phone, or it can be in paper form, and it would give them instructions on there on what they should do. So it would say something like, stand at this position, and there is a photo that shows them like this is the view that you should have, and take into account like how many walkers do you see, how many people are doing passive play, how many active, etc. Or how many cars are parked on the grass, something like that. And they would note down all the numbers in there, and it all aggregates into a spreadsheet that will kind of like extrapolate the total number of approximate park users for the entire year. So according to them, based on the research that they did, I think you need to do it 21 times, 20 something times across each season or something like that in order to have an accurate count for the full year. So it takes a lot of volunteers, and we're trying to figure out how that would make sense for us, how we can recruit volunteers that are reliable, and also how we can train the volunteers. So it probably means that we as staff members have to try it out first, figure it out how to execute a strategy, and following which, based on the report that they shared with us, to recruit volunteers for each park district. So like over here, we have the route that a volunteer would take. And so there's basically 3 routes in Front Park. In Prospect, there's 2 routes. And this group of students, they came to Buffalo themselves. They surveyed all the parks in person so that they could have an idea of like, okay, if I'm walking this route, can I have a full view of the entire park? For Days Park, this is the route they suggested. And it takes into account like entry count, pedestrian count, as well as what people are doing.
Does it take, I was part of, you know,
Yeah.
this committee, does it take into account inappropriate uses of parks?
Yes.
That's a point that I brought up.
So thank you, Mary. So Mary's comment on that was whether people who are surveying, like the volunteers in the park, whether they can take into account, like, let's say if, for example, excuse me, I know the metal detector thing has been an issue at Days Park. So if a volunteer is there and there's no question specific to metal detectors, but there will be a question at the end that specifically asks for regarding that. So the volunteer will be able to type that in to answer that question. So let's say they found maybe 3 people doing the metal detector work, and they can type it in there as part of that question. And it will be reported as part of the data once they submit it. And it could be many other things that are not appropriate for the parks, like people driving on the grass, for example. Yes, exactly. Any questions on this?
So is this something then that you're thinking about doing soon? I mean, is it something that they're going to actually undertake?
Yes, so this process will likely begin this fall and through next year. And it will be the outcomes of this project will be incorporated part of the 5-year plan, the next 5-year plan. Any other questions or people on Zoom?
What's impressive? See, it was very impressive.
I agree. Thank you. Okay. The next item is for interpretive signage. So right now we have secured funding for phase 2 for interpretive signage for 3 parks, and the parks in the West District are not in that phase 2 funding yet. So we're continuing to plan, but unfortunately due to capacity and resources, we have to do it in phases basically. But eventually when we get to this phase for Front, Prospect, and Days Park, we'll definitely love your input. But if in the meantime if you have any thoughts or ideas or themes that you feel is significant to the West Side, definitely reach out. And it doesn't mean whatever stories that you share or themes or content that you share, it does not mean that it will be exactly on the sign. It's more of like we collect all the data that we get and we try to find common themes in the input that you give us.
So what is that done online? Do people submit things online?
You can just email it to me for now. Yep. And then eventually, once we get funding for this space, for this district, we will reach out again to some folks to see if you want to be more involved in the planning process. Here are some questions that might spark your thoughts, and then you can email them to me. I will be putting all of these slides on the OCA website, so if you need a refresher, you can always go back there. Vandalism concerns. So if you see anything in the parks, I know I don't need to remind folks, but definitely call 311 if it's non-emergency, call 911 if it's something that is harmful or of danger to your neighbors or yourself. Try not to interfere directly. Thank you. This is the same message we give to our staff. We have some programming partners that wanted to highlight for the year, including Explore Buffalo, and we're using their space today, so I'm super grateful. And we're open to more programming partners as well. So if you have any folks that you're working with or feel like it's appropriate for Olmsted to work with or should cultivate relationships with, definitely let me know. Any questions so far? On the invasive species task force, I wanted to give some updates on this. So park system-wide, we are moving towards a more sustainable horticulture direction. It's a work in progress, but we're working towards it with two different views in mind, I guess. Number one is to optimize maintenance. So identifying horticulture from a horticulture perspective, what are some ways we can to optimize the maintenance process for a lot of our flower beds, and also invasive species. So when it comes to managing invasive species, how can we be more creative and smart, basically, in managing the invasive species areas in the park system? So from the horticulture side is working towards more perennials and less annuals. As annuals, as a lot of you might know, requires a lot of watering, and we don't have a lot of our parks areas do not have access to an irrigation system, so that's a huge challenge for us. And a lot of times halfway through the season, the plants die, we need to replace them again. It's a huge maintenance pool. So to work towards a more native perennial direction, and we are working towards that. It will take years over time to get to a stage where we can feel like we've seen progress. From an invasive species management side, Christy Munson, she's our workforce and education manager. She was previously a volunteer coordinator, so some of you might recognize her through that. She has started an invasive species management task force, and this task force is basically supporting her in invasive species management throughout the park system. So in the West District, fortunately, other than Front Park, Prospect and Days has some invasive species, but it's not as intense as a lot of the more woody area parks. Like Front Park has a bunch. MLK, Delaware, Cass, and Ovier is, especially Delaware and Cass, has the heaviest load of invasive species. South Park too, actually. So a lot of the target areas are there. But in these smaller parks, especially, making sure that the situation doesn't get worse is a huge thing that we want to make sure that we keep in control. So we are having workshops for the communities where through art and invasive species, hopefully we can make the learning and education component more fun. So we're having a Forage Inc. workshop with the Tool Library next month, and where folks can come and learn how you can use buckthorn berries to create art and watercolor, or it looks like watercolor, and paint some art pieces. And then in July, we're working with an artist to learn how to make paper out of another invasive species, and that will be at MLK Park as part of the site garden. So these are some opportunities, and we are open to more. So if you feel like you know an organization who is also working in the same direction, or if your community would like to be more involved in this, definitely reach out as well. At the end of the day, our goal is to spread the education and awareness so that we can manage it as a whole community. It takes a village, it truly does. Any questions? Okay. I will send the workshop stuff around as after this. Right. We have many volunteer opportunities. opportunities coming up. So feel free to, if you're interested, sign up there. We have a bunch of bench staining days coming up, and that's one of the hot favorites, basically helping to stain benches in the parks and give them a new life again. So Joanne Flores, she wasn't able to join us today, but she's in charge of the bench commemorative program. This is her right here. Very fun to work with, and yeah. So, and just make sure that once, if you see a bench with a tape around it, do not sit on it. You will get stained. Yeah. Any questions for me?
I'm sorry, I was absent for about a second for the volunteer program. Will you be sending out dates for those? Or for things like
Yep,
bench?
I can do that. Mhm. If not, you can go to the website and there is a link that has all the dates up there too.
Oh, okay.
I will send it out after this meeting as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. All right. Does anyone have any questions for me or things that you would like to share? Good or bad,
I
anything?
think the circles are looking great. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
People worked really hard on it.
Thank you. Yep. We've hired a new circles and plantings manager. Their name is Phoebe. So we're super excited to have Phoebe. Yeah, Phoebe's great. So if you see her crew, the crew out there, definitely say hi. Oh, thanks. Any other questions? All right. Well, I'm done. It's a quick meeting.
Thank
Thank you for information,
you.
Lou.
For all your help.
Of course, my plan. Thank you all for joining us. If you have any questions, you know how to reach me. So. Actually, while I have you guys here, and since we have some, I'm in the process of rethinking how to make it more fun and appeal to the younger generation, community meetings. And I know that not everyone likes to sit in the room hearing me talk. So I don't know, open to, I guess if anyone's up for it, a little brainstorming session, if that's okay. Folks on Zoom too, but no pressure. If you want to leave, that's totally fine. One idea that we bounced around at the office was to make this more like do it on a nice weather day and like a walking tour a little bit. So let's say if the presentation is heavy on a certain park, we can do it there. And then for the rest of the projects, I can have it in printouts. And so instead of me showing you where the new trees at Front Park will be, we can be at Front Park and showing you like these are the new trees, and folks can be there to kind of experience the projects themselves. So that's one of the thought. I don't know how practical that honestly is. I think we have to try it, but I'm open to other ideas. What do you? Will you go to such a meeting or a meeting tour?
I think it would be nice to see other parks in the district. I mean, I occasionally go to Front Park, but not very often, so it would be nice to, to go to other places or to go to some of the circles and look at what's going on.
Yeah.
I think I would be interested in doing that. I mean, I suppose a lot of it's gonna depend on weather.
Right.
So you have to have a rain date or whatever.
At least in front, you have the.
Mhm.
So,
Go in there. Yep. Yeah.
Do you have access to the new shelter in Prospect Park or no?
So it's not for public access. I went in there and it's those black and white tiles, which is like, what's that called? A sign of asbestos or something.
Asbestos.
Yes. So I don't think it's ready for public use yet. So yeah, it probably would not be suitable. Eventually it would be fantastic.
is there a bounce house in Front Park?
Yeah. So I was just, yeah. So there is a lot. I just saw it on the news. I mean, I knew that the event was happening. I just didn't know that it was this huge. But there is a bounce house, like a largest inflatable whatever thing happening at Front Park this weekend. Yep.
Did the city just give them the okay, or was it coordinated with the Olmsted Conservancy at all?
It was, I mean, all special events, we do coordinate with them. It seems like this is I'm not sure if it's national or statewide. There is like a professional organizer. It's not an individual.
Right.
Like they have a website that shows like locations all over the area that does this. And I it's on the pavement, so it's not on the grass, which is good. And it's probably one of the reasons why it was approved. Yep. But we are keeping a close watch, so not to worry.
Yes.
Making sure that it's good. And I'm sure they have security and all that.
It just feels like an odd, like they do this other than our harbor.
Oh, I see.
Outside, it's just like
Like, why did they choose front part?
an odd space.
I'm curious. Yeah, maybe I'm not too sure.
When's it tomorrow?
I think it's this weekend.
Oh.
Yeah, so they're preparing this weekend. Yeah, I have not driven by. I'm gonna drive by later. Check it out.
When my son was little, they landed a helicopter and
Really?
because the Army Reserve uses um, the castle.
Oh,
Yeah,
the
Army.
The Army uses the Army, yes. Yeah, but they couldn't land in Pasco.
Oh wow.
It's very thrilling.
Oh, yeah.
Was it like an emergency landing?
No, they were doing a bit of a whip.
Oh, I see.
Practicing being,
That's cool.
hiding behind trees.
Oh, wow. All right. Friends on Zoom, do you all have any ideas for or thoughts on the more revitalized community meeting format?
Not at this moment. I mean, I think some of the ideas tossed around have been good. I was trying to think of how to get more people interested, because every time I talk to people generally in my neighborhood, I mean, people really appreciate these parks, that they exist on the west side, and yet nobody's really that involved.
Yeah. So I wonder, are they not involved because they feel like they don't have to be involved? Or maybe they have no complaints, so they don't feel the need to be involved, which is a good thing for me, by the way.
I mean,
But-
it is a good thing. I think they also don't, when I talk to them about that there's a Buffalo Olmsted Parks Conservancy, people always seem to, they're often not even familiar with the
Mhm.
organization.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
And it's surprising to me because I don't know. I think in some ways, the longer you've lived in the area, the less you're aware that, these sort of changes in wanting to improve the community that's happened in the last 15 years or so. I think maybe people that have been around longer just haven't realized that there's actually a very active change with organizations, getting involved to keep things as beautiful as they are. I also think, in particularly the West District isn't, there's a lot of parks, and yet clearly it seems like the activity are from the people in the Delaware District.
Thank you. Yep. I hear your point, Tina. Thank you so much. So I think, is this Kelly, you think?
Kelly Weber?
K and J Weber?
Might be.
Yes, it is her. Okay. I believe you're talking about like the interpretive signage. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so I think that is true. So hopefully the interpretive signage eventually, when all of it is installed throughout the park system, would help folks to enhance their knowledge of the park system itself and also the Conservancy, as we know. Great. Thank you all for your time and feedback. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Please eat the pizza. Thank you, Zoom friends. Appreciate
Thank
y'all.
you. Bye.
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 We got Kelly and John. I think Kelly was.
So I will tell you what I have.